Welcome to Inside 11Alive News Investigates. I'm Cheryl Preheim. Today we are talking about short-term rentals. Think Airbnb or Vrbo. For more than 6 years, Atlanta has debated on how to regulate the 10,000 or so rentals operating in the city. There is a law on the books, but 11Alive News senior investigator Rebecca Lindstrom joining us now to talk about why the city is not enforcing the law that's on the books.
Right after that law passed in 2022, it was just sort of days, weeks later that the city decided, no, wait, we're not going to enforce this. But since then, major cities like LA, Chicago, and New York, they have cracked down on who can post a room for rent. I know, Cheryl, we were talking about this earlier. Do you ever use short-term rentals when you're traveling with your family?
We almost exclusively, because we have a bigger family. Sometimes you're traveling with other friends or grandparents, and for us, even just having that kitchen saves so much money if you're not eating out so much.
There are a lot of benefits, and I know I've certainly used them a lot with my family as well. And so that's why when I started hearing that there were other big cities that had made changes, I went immediately back onto the platform, did a search. I wanted to know, come on, that can't be true. And I remember a few years ago renting an apartment in New York during a family trip. Now, New York only allows people to rent a room out of their house, as in you can't rent the whole place. And I didn't believe that at first until, like I said, I did that search, but it really is now just kind of like mother-in-law suites or rooms in someone's apartment. So along with that, the ads basically say, hey, rent a room in New York, come stay with Joe. And what's interesting is that it's the same in San Francisco. So the big question is, if these cities can pass plans, why can't Atlanta?
It's really kind of tearing up the fabric of the community.
This story isn't about whether short-term rentals or STRs are good or bad. Home Park President Kathy Bomer can point out homeowners leaving to get away from the traffic, garbage, and noise they can create.
It's just constantly people in and out of there, the noise, the parties.
So, first thing, at the bathroom area.
Just as STR owner Aaron Appleton can show how his well-maintained units help the economy, supporting tourism and jobs.
Or have a maintenance team, have a cleaning team, and multiple cleaning teams based on location.
Instead, this is a story about kicking the can.
Short-term rental monitoring, enforcement is a very tedious and daunting task.
Again and again. In 2020, the city of Atlanta cracked down on STRs being used as party houses. In 2022, it started taxing them like hotels. But more relevant to residents, the city required STRs to register and limited who could rent them out.
This ordinance has never been enforced because of legal issues that have plagued it from day one.
She's right. The city still collects its tax money. But 11Alive News Investigates discovered for the past 3 years, it's never really enforced STR location rules.
And you can see here by council district.
Instead, holding repetitive public hearings on ordinance revisions without ever voting on them.
I think owner-occupant is a very good requirement.
I also think the elimination of the two-property maximum would definitely be fair.
So we've been trying to make a universal policy that fits the whole city. Policy making has been around the question of density and restrictions on distance.
But that's been the goal for a really long time.
Yes.
So again, what breaks the logjam?
I think that the World Cup may be the thing that breaks the logjam.
Even a vote now might not change much. Airbnb is already advertising to soccer fans.
I don't think they have what it takes to, the stomach to do what it takes.
Other cities around Atlanta have passed and are enforcing STR rules.
Acquired a property in Smyrna. Right now, the city of Smyrna has a short-term rental ordinance where you can only do 180 nights of short-term rentals.
From limits on the number of rental days to caps on occupancy based on square footage, Cobb and Hull counties, along with Smyrna, Brookhaven, the city of South Fulton, and Duluth, have all passed regulations, resulting in fines and code violations.
So how many properties would you say you have in Atlanta?
13.
Most of them acquired in the past 5 years as the city waffled over what to do. In Atlanta, Rebecca Lindstrom, 11Alive News Investigates.
And Home Park is one of the neighborhoods that really got the discussion going around party houses and out of control short-term rentals. And that's because a homeowner there in 2019 found bullet holes in his daughter's bedroom. Police say those bullets came from a party across the street at an STR. And Kathy says at one point they think 25% or 1 out of every 4 of the properties in Home Park were being used as an STR. She says they replace homes with the big duplexes. So they take the one that might be small in the neighborhood, tear it down, put in a big duplex. And she said one investor turned a brothel into an STR, but that she preferred the brothel because at least they were quiet. They did not want to be noticed. You know, the community didn't really want them to know what's going on there. Whereas the people who are on vacation, they're just there to have fun. So their intention may not to be disrespectful. Sure. Their intention may not to be doing anything against the community itself, but just the nature of being on vacation, your kids are running around, you're having fun. Well, it does just lend to more noise than might be there.
Sure.
Otherwise.
You're not thinking about the neighbors. You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the adage that the rules are for the rule breakers. Mm-hmm. But let's face it, there are some property owners who are doing everything right, that are, bringing in people that aren't causing trouble. At what point, do you make that distinction? Because there are property owners that are really keeping an eye on things, maybe thinking about the people around them.
Absolutely. And Aaron Appleton, who you saw us talk with, he says he does everything that he can. He really tries to do questionnaires and figure out, the rules of every community so that he's only renting to people who he thinks are going to be respectful. During public hearings, other owners talked about screening questions and rules that they had people sign to stay in their properties. Some STR owners do live on the property, like when you rent a room out of your house or a basement, or maybe you have a small unit behind your house. And they say those are helping them pay the mortgage, helping them actually stay in the community and allowing them to keep a watchful eye at the same time. So realistically, I think this frustration, as I've talked with people, comes down to density and homeowners that are surrounded by these short-term renters. These really are the people that at this point in time, I hear speaking out. Yeah, because it magnifies the issues at hand. You were talking about Atlanta kind of kicking the can on this issue down the road a little bit, but there are other cities, other places that have set some guidelines, standards, rules. What are you seeing happen in other places? And that's what I found really interesting, because we always think, I mean, perhaps not fairly, but we always think of Atlanta sort of setting the stage for what's going to happen in the metro area. And when I started looking into it and figuring out what these other communities were doing, I realized that there really is some structure that some communities have created. Almost all of them require the STR to have what's called a local agent, someone that can respond to a problem within, 45 minutes, anytime, day or night. Right now, Cobb County probably has one of the most structured policies that I've seen locally in Metro Atlanta. Here's what Cobb's structure looks like. There's only one guest allowed for every 390 square feet. So that would mean if you have a 1,000 square foot home, only 2 people can stay there. And there has to be at least 1 parking spot per bedroom, plus 1 additional spot. So a 2-bedroom, for example, would need 3 parking spots total. So you see how they've really gone into the details to break this down. The application in the city of South Fulton requires proof you've notified your neighbors. Brookhaven, like you heard Aaron talking about in Smyrna, limits the number of days you can rent out your unit short term. In both, it is 180 days or essentially 6 months. Smyrna, though, does give an exception if the unit is owner occupied, meaning someone is renting out a room in their house. And then Duluth has restrictions on density. I think they're the only community that I've really seen them focus in on this density question. So it really applies to how many units can exist within a duplex or a multi-housing unit. Now, I will say the thing about these rules is once you have them, you need to have some type of enforcement in place. Because according to our open records request, when the rules first started in Cobb County in 2023, there were 63 complaints. So far this year, there are more than 2,000. So people are getting the word, they're getting the message, and most of those are coming from neighbors who are reporting someone who they believe is renting out a house or apartment without a license. So obviously a sore subject there. Gwinnett County has created a task force in order to study the issue, and of course that task force has made a number of recommendations, from an annual independent inspection of the unit, a limit on corporate ownership, and a 3 strikes, you're out policy on noise and nuisance violations. Although while they've had the task force and they've made the recommendations, I haven't actually seen a formal proposal or a date on when they might even take a vote. Unlike DeKalb, which is scheduled to vote on its policy at the end of July, it would require the property owner to register the unit, get a business license, and collect an 8% hotel motel tax. So a lot of information, but I think really the big takeaway there is there are communities that are in their own way looking at what their needs are, what's the tourism, what's the draw, why is someone coming here, and then trying to create some rules that provide, some guidance around that.
A couple of things I'm thinking about as we, host All-Star games or FIFA World Cup championships, and people are coming to lots of different parts of the metro area. It's going to be really important that each person understand the rules in the specific area that they're staying. That's interesting, and that enforcement I think is so key, as you're talking about, because I guess ideally the more enforcement, the more there is people adhering to the rules because they know, that there might be a consequence.
Absolutely, and I think that's been one of the things that's really held the city of Atlanta back. I mean, they have 10,000 of these units, they think, in their surveys, whereas some of these other communities might have a couple hundred. So they're going to have a big enforcement challenge on their hand, and the pent-up frustration from the community who's saying, hey, now we finally got these rules, we want to enforce them. So they're going to start getting a lot of calls.
Let's do something about it.
That's right. And so that's why we say you absolutely have to know what that enforcement is going to be. And what's interesting is we were talking about some of these communities that are out in the suburbs.
Like HOA communities.
Right. They get to create their own rules. Now, the city of Atlanta doesn't really have a lot of those HOAs. And so what's happening in the suburbs can be a little bit different because they have those sort of mini government units. And a lot of those HOAs are just flat out saying, we don't want short-term rentals, and then they're just able to nip that off. In the city of Atlanta, the best parallel is really the condo associations. They have taken action in some case blocking or limiting the number of short-term rentals, but I know of at least one building that is just overrun with rentals, and they have more rentals than they have residents. They feel like their condo board is essentially run by the short-term rental industry, and those are the people who are really reaching out to the city council and asking for some kind of relief. They say, hey, the city is taxing these short-term rentals. The city's getting the money that comes from these rentals, but they're just not doing the tough work to try to make this situation also work for the residents. Kathy Bamer explained one practical problem that they have to deal with.
They don't necessarily put the garbage out when the garbage men come on Monday morning. They miss it. And so the garbage sits, and it's usually overflowing because they might have had a house full of people, and it sits out there for a whole week.
So what about Atlanta? What are they not enforcing?
Right, because as we said in 2022, they did pass a set of rules. They're just not enforcing them. So the rules on the books that are not being enforced are that you have to be an Atlanta resident to operate an STR, and you can only have 2 properties. So really kind of narrowing in how many people can participate in this. You have to pay for an annual license, and you have to notify your neighbors that you are operating a short-term rental business.
This is not going away. Lots of people come into Atlanta. We know that short-term rentals are here to stay. So is there any plan the city seems to be leaning towards, because eventually there's going to have to be some action?
Absolutely. And it's hard to say that this is the plan they're moving toward, because there have been so many different ordinances that have been introduced and so many public hearings that, quite frankly, if they really decide to get serious about this, they could start entirely from scratch over the things that they've discussed up to this point. But the things that I've really seen them lean towards are, kind of making it open to anyone to be able to operate an STR, not just people who live in the city of Atlanta. That way, they just need to have that local agent like we've heard of from other communities. And I had a chance to sit down and talk with the president of the council to kind of ask him, really, what are you trying to do? And he explained just how challenging this equation is because there are so many different people involved that they're trying to help make happy.
I think there are three kinds of STRs that we're trying to make a policy that fit all three. One is an owner who may have an in-law suite in the back that they rent out. One is somebody who may have 2 or 3 properties. Maybe their next door house got sold and they bought it, and that's a very small kind of property portfolio. And then you have those that have dozens of properties, and they're primarily maybe catering to the film and TV industry, or maybe just running a medium-sized business. There are different kinds of requirements around each of those three.
Interesting. So many things at play. You're thinking about kind of quality of life for somebody who lives in that neighborhood, whether it's bullet holes in a bedroom wall or just trash sitting out on a curb. But then there's the other part of this, which is money.
Right.
What about the investor side of this? What do investors or people running all of these short-term rentals say about it?
Because sure, this has become a very lucrative business for a lot of people, or just a way, as we mentioned earlier, for some people to stay in their home and continue to be able to afford it. But even the investors that show up at these public hearings really seem to want to finally have some rules, at least know what direction the city is going to go in so that they can also move forward. I mean, businesses need to have some kind of certainty to know what they're planning for. So they do support some type of framework. Of course, they want their properties to be grandfathered into any new restrictions. Investors like Aaron say they get it. They have started, as we mentioned, screening guests more. They have hired, some of them, security to check on the properties. They have their cleaning crews maybe come and deal with the trash so that it is not out on the street before pickup day. But Aaron says he knows that change is coming, and he has started looking to communities that are more dependent on tourism, creating his own micro resort developments in places like Helen.
And they have sub 600 true residents, but over 3 million plus travelers. So you have to think about it. They're incentivized to keep short-term rentals in business, because you get rid of short-term rentals, I mean, that economy plummets, whereas Atlanta's going to be fine with or without short-term rentals.
Interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta will be fine, but again, you do have a lot of people who have purchased. I mean, just think of 10,000 properties. Somebody owns those.
Yeah.
Somebody is making their own finance decisions based off the fact that that's in their portfolio. So they're certainly going to have a loud voice at the table as the city figures out what to do.
10,000 and counting so far, though no actual date for a vote on any official plan to move forward in Atlanta.
No dates. So we'll just have to see what happens.
All right. We shall see. Rebecca, thanks so much. Thanks for providing us, I think, such a really interesting and complete full circle look at an issue that maybe we've all dipped our toe in a little bit, but now we understand it a lot better, how it's impacting our communities. We really appreciate that. And make sure that you contact Rebecca or any member of our 11Alive News investigative team by calling 404-873-9111 or emailing investigates@11alive.com as things come up that you'd like us to look into as well. Thanks so much for joining Inside 11Alive News Investigates. Take care.